share my screen here. And Josette is my co-host. So Josette, if you could please, because there are too many things going on my screen, if you could check out the waiting room and everything and let folks in as they come in, I would appreciate that. But so welcome everybody. My name is Jamie Petrosky. I started with the URA shortly ago, back in January. And I am managing our Neighborhood Initiatives Fund program. And so for this next round, this is our first information session of 3. So it's March 17th, 2022. Just some general housekeeping. If possible, please stay muted throughout the presentation. Feel free to use the chat function for questions that come up during the presentation. Josette will be handling those questions as they come in through the chat, but of course we will have opportunity to answer questions at the end of the presentation. I think if anybody is on like their iPhone or really any phone, I believe it's *6 to mute and unmute, but I think most of us are at our desktops, but just as an FYI. So today, our quick agenda, we're going to do some welcome and introductions. We have a lot of our URA folks on here. Many of us are new. So just want to make sure that you know who we all are. I'm going to overview our program, talk about the different types of projects and activities that are eligible and ineligible for the Neighborhood Initiatives Funds. The program schedule for this year, which is also available on our website, and then program details and requirements, and then of course our time for questions and comment. So like I said, for introductions, my name is Jamie Petrosky, managing the NIF program. Prior to this, I have a lot of community organizing experience, so I have been in many of your guys' seats. Before I worked at Uptown Partners as well as Mount Washington Community Development Corporation. So I'm very familiar on your guys' end of this program. And so like I said, of course, I'm happy to answer questions, as having that experience and now managing the program. Josette, I'll hand it to you to introduce yourself, and then I can't see anybody else on my screen. And if other URA folks could just introduce themselves after Josette, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Josette Fitzgibbons. I'm the manager of Neighborhood Business District Programs for the URA. And I know a lot of you, but not all of you from other activities. So welcome today. And I actually see, so Talia, Claren, and Alyssa, I think are the other URA staff. So start with Talia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Talia O'Brien. I'm also new to the URA, and I am working with the Neighborhood Business Districts program as a program analyst, and I will be managing the Avenues of Hope ARPA program.
And then Claren, are you there? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Claren Healy. I'm sorry, my camera is not turning on. I'm a 24-year employee of the URA. I'm the senior business solutions officer, and I also work in real estate with finding site selections and relocations. So it's nice to meet you all.
And I thought I saw Alyssa on here, but now I don't.
Thank you, Josette.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alyssa Monette. I'm also new. I started here at the URA in February, working as administrative assistant in the business solutions unit. So I'll turn it back to Jamie and Josette.
Thank you, Alyssa. So taking a look at our program overview, I'm sure some of you have seen this presentation some time ago. I have revamped it, got some new photos in here and everything. But so as it always has been, the Neighborhood Initiatives Fund is a reimbursement grant program for neighborhood scale projects in business districts. So our grant scale is still, we can have awards up to $100,000. So the goals for the use of these funds, of course, is to improve quality of life and then to make our neighborhoods more desirable places to live. So for eligibility for these applications are nonprofit entities, which include government agencies or nonprofit or nonprofit organizations with for-profit development partners. Oops. There we go. So looking at our eligible projects and activities, this does include hard and soft costs. But so we're looking at things like vacant property reclamation and stewardship. This would include a vacant building as well as a vacant lot, historic preservation, brownfield redevelopment, and construction of public space and neighborhood infrastructure improvements, including but not limited to streetscape improvements, transit and transportation related improvements, parks and open space improvements, green infrastructure, and or public art. And we'll get a little bit more into, some of the requirements for some of these other types of projects as well. And so what grant funds may not be used for are projects outside of the city of Pittsburgh, residential dwellings or the residential portion of mixed use buildings, improvements proposed in the city right of way that have not been approved or coordinated with the city, improvements proposed on properties without site control, operating, marketing, travel or promotional expenses, operating overhead or ongoing programming and maintenance, and administrative and development fees. Okay. So our program schedule this time around, as we know, the applications opened last Friday on March 11th. I apologize for the typo, but it was March 11th. And they are going to close on May 10th. So it's a little bit of a longer window, but because with Easter being so late this year in April, and folks taking vacations possibly and PTO and things like that, we wanted to make sure that folks had enough time to get their applications in. And we intend to announce awardees in June, and this will be, after our review committee meets together and goes through all of the applications. And then sometime during July and August, we will be executing our contracts. And so your project manager would be in touch with you for that. And as we always like to remind folks, please, 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 you cannot spend project-related funds until after your contract is executed. So you would not be eligible for reimbursement if you start spending money towards your project and we don't have an executed contract agreement. Okay, so some additional program details and requirements. So there are 2 tiers of available grants. That first tier, we have a minimum of a $20,000 grant up to $30,000, and there are no matching requirements for this grant. When you meet tier 2, this is $30,001 up to that $100,000 threshold. So it's a 50% match, which means for every $2 of our NIF program funds invested into the project, there must be at least a $1 match invested from the agency or from the applicant. So these matching funds just cannot come from, they have to come from non-URA and non-city sources. So this would be grant funding, well, for most of you all, I'm sure it would be grant funding, but if you had other operating funds, just so long as it is non-URA and non-city sources. Okay. So proposals must meet the following criteria to be eligible for grants. So demonstrated public support. These would be things like letters of support from your district council person, letters of support from community groups, as well as, potentially neighbors, like neighboring buildings affected by, the project in question. It must be financially feasible. You must demonstrate site control. Your committed and documented match if you are within that tier 2 grant agreement. It has to contribute to neighborhood stability or revitalization, in compliance with a neighborhood plan if your neighborhood has one, includes a maintenance plan if applicable. And again, reminding folks that project funds cannot be spent until the contract is signed by the URA and grantee, including all of the above criteria as well. Okay. Now, for a little bit more of our nitty gritty details, so projects must meet all state and federal statutory mandates. So typically when folks hear this, we're talking about Davis-Bacon wages. And so this is, related to construction and labor. And that trigger amount depends on the funding source. Internally at the URA, our policy is when the grant is $25,000 or higher, it would have to meet those requirements. This time around, we are funded with a more unrestricted funding source, but if it were something like CDBG, some of these trigger amounts would be a little bit different. But luckily it's not CDBG this time around, so there's a little less bureaucracy. Any property rehabilitated using NIF funds are subject to inspections by the URA. We will let you know if that is necessary. And like I mentioned earlier, projects will be assigned to a project manager. And so we like to make that introduction with myself and the project manager to go through your scope of work and make sure that everything is, still what you intended it to be prior to executing that contract. And then all successful applicants are required to demonstrate and document a good faith effort to obtain minority and women business enterprise participation for projects or activities that meet or exceed these thresholds below, which is the City of Pittsburgh's goal, 18% minority and 7% women business enterprise participation. And MWBE goals, these apply to professional service contracts of $75,000 or greater. Okay, so talking a little bit more of design standards. So any projects that propose work in the public right of way, you must comply with the standards established by the City of Pittsburgh. So most commonly, we would be working with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure and permits, licensing, and inspections. So URA and city staff will review designs to ensure that they're consistent with the city's standards and code. And any projects that propose public art on city-owned property or within the city's right-of-way must be reviewed by the city's Art Commission. And we can help make connections for folks if they have not gone through that process before. And so if match is required, the payment request, when you go to request your reimbursement, must document that matching payment. So as an example, if you are a tier 2 awardee, you're requesting a reimbursement of $1,000. We will do that math so that you will actually be reimbursed for that $500 and then documenting that $500 of your match, that 50%. So final payments are not released until you have any required permits and all of that information documented. And for your very last and final reimbursement request, we do ask that you submit a grant report. It is now available online. So for any folks who have been previous awardees and are, still throughout our process from last year, that will be available to you, but it will be a Google form just like our application is this time around. So very easy to complete. And then again, as a reminder, please do not spend funds until the contract is signed by the URA and grantee. So as our final note, please read the guidelines, and we will repeat it to you over and over and over again to please read the guidelines. They are available online on our website, which we can share in the chat with you. And then of course, I can send them to folks as well. And, we will make sure that they are available for you. And then of course, Josette and myself, we are always available for questions. I know folks would primarily go to Josette in the past when she was running NIF, but now we have a dedicated person, which is myself. So please, feel free to email either of us to have any questions answered or anything. Okay.
If I can just reiterate read the guidelines. Save yourself work by reading the guidelines, because if your project isn't eligible, then don't put the work into submitting an application. So just please, please, please read the guidelines, because the worst thing that we want to do, we like to try to say yes to people when we can. And the worst thing is if you put all this time into doing an application and it's just not eligible. So just please read the guidelines.
Right. And if something is not clear in the guidelines, again, you can email me. I'm happy to have phone calls, Zoom meetings, anything with folks just to really make sure that you understand the guidelines and how your project may or may not fit in under these guidelines. Whoops. There we go. Are there any other questions? I do see one from Daniel in the chat. I will get these guidelines in the chat shortly. I just have to pull them up. 1 second. Okay. There's a very, very full of letters link, but the link to the guidelines is in the chat. Are there any other questions, comments?
Yeah, the
Anybody
guidelines are on,
confused?
the guidelines are at the same place on our website as the application. So if you looked at the application, the guidelines are right next to it on the website too.
But if there are no other questions, then I think that we would be okay to go and dismiss you all. I know it's the end of the day, so I'm sure some folks' brains are a little tired too. I am always available via email when folks have questions that come up, maybe after you read the guidelines and you need some clarity. And again, I will be sharing this presentation with folks as well, so that if you wanted to a refresh, you know, you'll be able to have that. Oops. All right, everybody. Thank you for participating, and I'm sure we will see you all at some point. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody coming.
Thanks, guys.